All righty. So next up, we have a very exciting speaker. Bill Aulet, for those of you who don't know, is the managing director of the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship at MIT here, and he's also a senior lecturer at the MIT Sloan School of Management. The center is responsible for entrepreneurship across all 5 schools at MIT, starting with education, but also extending well outside the classroom with student clubs, conferences, competitions, networking events, awards, hackathons, student trips, and accelerators. His work has won numerous awards, and during his tenure at the Trust Center, he's conceived, designed, and overseen the implementation of many new innovative programs. Prior to joining MIT, Bill had a 25-year track record of success in business. He's directly raised more than $100 million in funding for his companies, and more importantly, has led to the creation of hundreds of millions of dollars in market value in those companies. He's the author of Disciplined Entrepreneurship, which is somewhat of a guide for budding entrepreneurs, and the creator of several online entrepreneurship courses, which are available for free. So anyway, without further ado, Bill Aulet.
Thank you, Beth. Do I need to use this? Do I need to use this? I do need to use it?
Yes, for recording.
Oh, for recording purposes. So first of all, congratulations, Ramesh, on a great program. It's been, I know it's been a labor of love for you for a while. And John Werner, where's John? I saw John on campus. Is that a Ministry of Supply shirt, John? Yeah, I love it. I love it. We buy our own. And Beth, congratulations. And I see Lita Nelson here as well. Lita's run the technology licensing office for a while, for quite a while, and she just recently retired. So I'm sure many other people in the room. But let me start off by saying I'm very sorry for Donald Trump. He does not represent America. And I say that seriously because I think that I want to get back to emerging worlds and why something like this is so important so that things like this don't continue to happen. We need to have inclusive entrepreneurship. This is really, really very important. And I'm not just spouting out a Donald Trump joke as much as I would like to, but he's not a joke anymore. So what I'm going to talk about is how we go from innovator to entrepreneur. It's hard for me to stand still. So how we go from innovator to entrepreneur. That's the topic. So the first thing is, when you're an engineer, define your terms. What is meant by innovation? And the apocalypse had occurred to me about 2 weeks ago with regard to this, because I've been playing basketball since for almost 60 years now. And basketball is this place where you go and it's old school. You just play, and it's the beauty of it is it's just timeless. And then when I showed up for our game 2 weeks ago in Concord, and this was on the wall, it said, Hoop Innovators Basketball Programs. The words disruptive innovation has just become so cliched. It's used on everything. It has gotten down to our basketball game. So let me step back and be more precise about what innovation is, all right? So when you look at it, if we had time, I would go through and say, what is innovation? And innovation is something that has impact on the world. It's something that has value for the world. And then with my students, I say, well, what is that? And they would say, it's invention. We just did this the other day with a lot of engineers. It's something new to the world. But that's not true. That's not true. Something that's new to the world doesn't necessarily have an impact on it. An idea does not change the world. A patent, as much as I love patents, Lita, you know I love patents, they do not change the world until those patents are used. A technology in the laboratory does not change the world. What's needed is, and this goes back to the research from Ed Roberts and other people, is you have to add commercialization to the equation. You have to add that the idea is then commercialized for it to create value or have impact in the world. And that's very, very important. So you need to have something that's new to the world, a technology, an idea, a patent, but then you have to commercialize it to have impact. Now that doesn't mean you have to commercialize in the sense of make a lot of money. This is to have impact. You have to get it out there to have lots of people to use it, to create. So the question that I ask is, which is more important? And I just asked this to a class of 300 engineers, and what do you think they said? Invention. Invention is the most important. And this is the perception that many people have. Now let's unpack that. First of all, it's not invention plus commercialization. It's invention times commercialization. Even though Ed Roberts is my mentor, if I have zero commercialization, I have no value. I can't it's not a sum of the two. Technically, it's a product. I'm sorry to geek out, but this is MIT. So this is our space to geek out. So it's a product of the two. So you can't have zero. So which is more important now? Of course, we need both. So let's just look at history. What are the most innovative companies in the world today? Anyone? Google. Tesla. Who else? Apple. Right? So it's usually Google and Apple come up all the time. And by the way, if you look at that from a way to measure it, those two companies are producing cash at a level that's prolific, the amount of cash they're producing from their innovations. And that is but one measure of impact or commercialization capability. But those two companies are producing cash at an extraordinary level. So let's just look at that. Do you remember this product? That's the first product that made Apple really, truly innovative. What is that? That's the Macintosh. The precursor was the Lisa, right? And this is better known to some of our younger people by this one. This is the iMac, right? But it started out. And what was the fundamental invention that was made in that? It was Windows icon mouse pointer, and it came from Xerox. Everybody knows that, right? It wasn't Jobs. He actually went in and saw it and took it out. And Xerox PARC was unable to commercialize the things, but they provided the invention that other people were able to commercialize it. So it was Apple that commercialized it. That's so often talked about as that a one-off deal. The fact of the matter is, it isn't at all. Remember, the next breakthrough product from Apple was the iPod. And then the iPod, what is the fundamental technology that's behind the iPod? It's the MP3 technology. Who invented that for a free lunch today? Who? No, it was not Kodak. How do you know that? It's Fraunhofer. By the way, I can be sitting with 1,000 people and they don't know that Fraunhofer invented it. It's a Fraunhofer Institute invented it. Are they spitting out cash? Do you know, like Apple? Not anywhere near it, and people don't even know who they are. So in fact, over and over again, the inventor, and then the other company we mentioned is Google. All right, what's Google's business again? No, it's not search. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's advertising. It is the world's most prolific advertising company that ever been seen. And it's just remarkably dominant. Is anyone here in the advertising industry? It's just hoovering up all the money in the industry. The bell curve isn't like this democratizing of the world with technology. Not the case. That bell curve is just tightening right around Google. And what was the product that allowed that? This is the AdWords logo. And that's Google. That is the essence of Google, the world's most innovative company, and it funds everything they do, hands down. And for a free lunch today, who invented the fundamental technology behind this? Who? No, not CERN. No, not DoubleClick. This guy, Bill Gross, and a company called GoTo.com, which became Overture. They were unable to take it, commercialize it at a scale at all. But Google had this algorithm, and they realized to monetize it, they needed to come up with something else. They went over and figured out what was there, with this other company, and they said, they're not using it properly. We'll use this auction methodology, and we will implement it. And did they ever? Did they ever? Now, we can go on and on about this, by the way. With Microsoft, did they invent their fundamental ideas? No. Not one of them. Not one of them. You go back to the original operating system, DOS, that was CPM. That was Gary Kildall's operating system. So, you know, as Steve Jobs said, the great innovator of our time, good artists create, great artists steal. Which ironically, Pablo Picasso said that before him, but he didn't attribute it to him. which makes perfect sense, right? But this concept of invention dominates the innovative process is just not true. And I don't know how many of you know this fellow here. Does anyone recognize this person here? This might help you. He just won one of these things. That's Bengt Holmstrom. He's in the economics department here. And he comes down, and we've had this discussion, and he says, Bill, innovation is overrated. Imitation is equally, if not more valuable. And when you look at the data, imitating other people's ideas that already exist is where huge value is created. Much more value is created from that. And this is a concept of, you know, that Alex Lafley had at Procter & Gamble. It's great to invent things, but reapplied with pride should be seen as a powerful force as well. So, and when you look at this place right here, it's a little fuzzy, I'm sorry. I was doing this last night. MIT, everybody thinks these things that come out of MIT are all just technology that comes out of the laboratory. And we have compelling cases of that, very compelling cases of that. But do you know that MIT alumni start 1,000 companies a year? And how many of those do you think come directly out of the labs to create companies? You can't answer this, Lita. We know this number because they have to license their technology from us. Yes. No, you can't answer it.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
The back door is quite wide.
Okay. Anybody want to guess 1,000 companies, how many come through the technology licensing office, which is, and I'm not saying it because Lita's here, I would prefer not to flatter anybody, as well know. We have the best technology licensing office. How many of those 1,000 companies come through the technology licensing office in a good year? Guess, 100? 100. That would only be 10%. That would only be 10%. Do you think only 10% of the companies go through a technology licensing office? It's 30. That would be a good year. Now, here's the point. Even if it's 100, the majority of them, and I can go through my students and what comes through ours, is they come here and they learn how to fish. They do not just simply catch a fish in the laboratory and bring it right out. What you have going on by Ed Roberts' studies shows that it's transfer not of technology as much as it is a transfer of knowledge. Now, do these individual companies, those 30 to maybe 100 that go through their back door, Bose, Akamai, make a big difference? They make a huge difference. They're the tip of the spear. But understand that it's also the Oktas, the BPs, the pill packs, the unicorns that have just come out in the past few years that learn this by watching what's going on here, and then they apply it to other technologies that come from elsewhere or other ideas, market pull. So this question of the commercialization process and skills is incredibly important, and that's the point I want to make. It's not one, okay, so which is more important? It's a false dichotomy to say that it's one or the other. When I change it to a product, as one manager said, the power of and. You can do this and this. By the way, I didn't like that when he said that, and I really want to use it on other people now, but I don't even use it on my own employees. But it's not a question of, you know, do you have invention or commercialization? Great companies should have both of them. And when you look at places even like Google and Apple, they try to then, even if they start out with stronger on the commercialization side, the invention side, they then try to build up the invention. And you can't just be a shell of a company that just commercializes. You have to be able to have internal capability as well. So this is very important, but I want to get respect here for the commercialization process, because that is what takes a company, that takes an invention to an innovation. And now we're going to talk about what takes an innovation to a company. If you have any questions, please just jump in. So let's just talk about the entrepreneurship process, okay? The entrepreneurship process. If I have a breakthrough technology, I have the opportunity to license it to other people, and it can become a feature on their product. That's the one. That might be a risk level of 1, a commitment level of 1. I can stay in my current job. I can potentially do that. The reward payback for that is X. If I then say, no, I'm going to take an invention and make it into a product, the level of risk, the level of commitment, the level of investment, the level of reward goes up at least 2 orders of magnitude. If Google, or I'll give other examples you can think of, if Google had just licensed their technology, their search engine, to Yahoo or Microsoft, they would have gotten a small amount of cash for it. They would have not gotten a lot of reward for it. But what they did is they made the product. And then after that, you're talking about higher levels of commitment, levels of risk, and levels of reward. You can make a company. So whenever you look at a new idea, someone who's inspired, do they want to have a feature? Do they want to have a product? Or do they want to have a company? A product is often bought by a company after the company gets going, but a company is a whole different level. It has a portfolio of products. So the entrepreneurial process to create new companies first starts with taking an invention to make it an innovation, to make it a product, but then you follow up to make it a company. And this is important. This is very important, because when we look at it, the innovative process here, we're a center of entrepreneurship. Lead at the center of technology. It's very important that you not be a center at MIT of innovation, because if you walk around to some place and say, I'm going to teach you about innovation, Ramesh would say, you are crazy. I've been doing innovation before you were born, or almost anybody else, because that's the essence of what MIT is trying to do. So we had to carefully make sure that what we do is entrepreneurship, which is business essentials. How do you frame the decision? Do you want to have a feature, a product, a company? How do you start this organization? How do you then grow that organization? And by the way, you can call it venture engineering as well, because if you put engineering after any word at MIT, it makes it infinitely more credible. True or not true, Lita? Very true, right? Engineering gives us more credibility. So venture engineering, you'll see that term, and it's true. We're trying to apply a methodical process to venture creation. That's our goal, to take it away from black magic to systematic ways to do that. And it's not just something that's done in a silo. In fact, these two things have to be linked with each other. So one of my companies did 3D haptics. Let me just check for time. Is 3D haptics. So the invention was in the lab. Here's a 3D haptic device. That was Thomas Massey. Then he would go to me and say, okay, what can we use this for? We could use it for medical, we could use it for this, but I need this type of resolution. Can you do this type of, I can do this type of resolution, but it will require this footprint and this cost point. Well, can we handle that cost point? So we're going back and forth between these two things. What are the market requirements? What are the technological capabilities? Back and forth. And it's not just once here. If I was better at PowerPoint, I would have things going back and forth here. And as Thomas Edison said, the great innovator, the hero along with Benjamin Franklin of the United States, is he measured innovation as a number of times you can iterate on a new idea within the first 24 hours when you have it. So how quickly can you innovate between the market and the lab to figure out, does this idea work? What's it work for? What's the business need for it? This is critically important. And if someone's good at PowerPoint and they can help me how to do that, I would greatly appreciate it so I can improve this slide. So that's what entrepreneurship is. It's the business essentials. Now, as the business essentials, how to build a company, is something that we have worked very hard to try to build into a noble profession here, as opposed to just saying it's black magic. We don't want to just have something, by the way, all these slides will be available to you, and there's ones up on SlideShare that go into much more detail on this right here, and we have a website called Entrepreneurship Educators, forum.io. But this just gets into the process of entrepreneurship and taking it seriously and breaking it down like an engineer. I am a fake engineer because I have my engineering degree from Harvard, which people at MIT think is hysterically funny that an arts and crafts school grants engineering degrees. But I like systematic thinking. And so when we think about a startup building a company, we first have to nucleate it. We have to come up with, do we know what we're getting into? Some of the things, feature, product, company. What's required? An honest assessment of the journey. Then we have to come up with the idea for it and refine the idea and make sure we're getting at a meaningful problem. Then we have to assemble the initial founding team. This is all right here. And then there has to be some soft skills so that this team can operate in an area of ambiguity and high risk. After we have that, we've seen that then you move to what's the product you're going to develop? What's the market need? What's your capabilities? What are the assets? And this is the one up here, defining and refining your product market fit. This is the 24 steps that we go through in an extremely methodical fashion. It starts with design thinking, ends up with a product plan coming out the other end. Highly iterative. But that is all based off doing primary market research, getting out and being able to talk to customers and understand what's going on in the marketplace. There's a whole bunch of work here, how you start qualitative and go to quantitative. When do you use surveys? When do you not use surveys? What are the biases involved with that? All this stuff, there's a body of knowledge on these things, and I hate to use the word best practices, but there is best practices is what you can do. And then finally, how do you build a strategy in here to make a scalable business? How do you make a scalable business? A scalable product, I should say, scalable product. That's what I call the product definition stage. But a product does not make a company. And now we're going to get into all these other skills that are needed out here for the venture development. Once we have a product, how do you build a company out of that? What are all the other things that you need to do? So I don't have time to go through this. If you're interested, there's a lot out there put up on the internet, and this is what we go through in a whole semester class. So how do you do that? And what have we found to be effective? The first thing is to be an entrepreneur is it doesn't start with putting someone in a classroom. It starts with the heart. It starts with the heart. You have to want to be an entrepreneur. You really have to want to be an entrepreneur. So I have 4 kids, and I wanted them to be basketball player. I'm a basketball player. I would have done anything to help them be a basketball player. But guess what? I don't know what it's like in your countries, but kids here don't listen to their parents, and if they want them to do A, then they're going to do B. Maybe it's true everywhere. But they didn't want to be basketball players. So I could take them to the best places. I could do all this stuff. I could buy them a basketball. They weren't going to be basketball players. Now, why do I tell you that story? Because everyone in this room can relate to that. We can't make people entrepreneurs who don't want to be entrepreneurs. It's such a hard thing to be an entrepreneur. It's not like going into a corporate job and saying, I kind of like this and I'm going to go in every day. To be an entrepreneur, you have to fight through very, very difficult things. You have to fight through failure, getting embarrassed at times, having to fire people that you like. It's a very, very difficult thing. So if the heart isn't there, it's not going to be effective. So program pillars we start is you have to have the heart to be an entrepreneur. Once you have that heart and we cultivate that, the mindset and willingness to be different, not just the willingness to be different, inspired to be different, inspired to take on great challenges that no one has solved before in the face of humiliation and poverty and whatever it takes, that ultimately you will succeed and have an impact. But once we have that and we cultivate that, and that's very, very easy, frankly, to get here at MIT because we have a great culture for this, The next thing we do is then teach them, what is it like? You want to go into battle to do this? How are we going to train you how to do that? This is the theory as to how to do it, right? And then once we have the knowledge, that is insufficient because now you have to have the hands, the capability to do it. Now all this is become pretty clear. Well, one thing that became very clear 2 or 3 years ago to us was, what has made us very successful when we are successful is we also provide the home. So we talk about the heart, head, hands, and then home, is to provide a community for people to be able to be entrepreneurs, the support structure, the so-called ecosystem to be a successful entrepreneur. This is hugely important because it's up and down when you're an entrepreneur. And when you're down emotionally, can you talk to somebody else? When you need that contact, can you plug into other people's contacts? When you need some help on how do you go through something at 3 a.m., can you talk to somebody else? Can you just go someplace? The power of the community is extraordinary. And if you get a chance, I would encourage you, many of you have here, just go over to the Trust Center and walk through. And you'll see people who are just on this. There's no friction to walk in there. And I am so proud when one person said, I've finally found my people. And that type of thing is incredibly important. As Rudyard Kipling said, we cultivate strong wolves, but Rudyard Kipling said, the strength of the pack is in the wolf. The wolf. You need strong wolves, and we got those at MIT. But then the strength of the wolf is in the pack. And when you're an entrepreneur, you're taking on enormous organizations like IBM, like Google, like Apple. How can you do that as a lone wolf? You can't. You build a community. So we have a whole system to kind of do that goes through and takes you from idea and inspiration to the end, and we do it every year. And we start with the T=0 festival, Yes, I Can Do It, to get at the heart. And then we methodically move them through the head and the hands, and then integrate them into the community and show them how important it is to be a good member of the community. And if any of you are interested to see the results of it, just go out to entrepreneurship.mit.edu and look at the Delta V presentations that happen every year, because those people start from a standstill. Those people start from a standstill. They're sitting in the crowd the first year, and then the next year they're on the stage. And with a matter of less than 12 months, we create these innovation-driven entrepreneurs. So, last things I want to say is that I talked about invention to innovation to entrepreneur. The most overrated thing in entrepreneurship is the original idea. The most overrated thing in entrepreneurship is the original idea. Matt Marx's research has shown that you go back and forth, and when you look at successful companies, they go back and forth. You have, the idea has to figure out who the market is, who's the customer. Then you have to have a methodical process to go through that. And this is what we teach people. What's that methodical process? And then the last thing is, that's the most important thing, is the team. How do you build a team that has a common vision, shared values, and then complementary skills? How do you have that heterogeneous team? Because tall people like to hire tall people. Short people like to hire short people. Salespeople like to hire salespeople. Technical people like to... Yet we've seen that successful teams come from heterogeneity. This is the research that Ed Roberts has done. How do you get a hacker to respect a hustler? And then how do you get the hacker and the hustler to respect a hipster? Because you need all three of them on the team. You need someone to build it, you need someone to go out and get the customers, you need someone to be very concerned with that user experience. And so this is the process, the discipline of entrepreneurship that Beth talked about. We have online tools, we have online courses that you can take for free. Unfortunately, the book is not free. It is $17 on Amazon. But there's a whole bunch of stuff out there that you can get to see that entrepreneurship is a serious body of knowledge. So, what does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? What we tell people is, first of all, you have to have that heart. You have to be willing to be different. You have to have the spirit of a pirate. But that is insufficient. To be the spirit of a pirate, you also have to go out and you have to have the execution skills of a Navy SEAL at the same time. And when you look at successful entrepreneurs, that's what they do. That's what they do. They're willing to be different, but when they figure out what needs to be done, Steve Jobs or whoever it is, this great entrepreneur, they get extremely focused and they get down to the skills that are needed. So that's it. Do I have time for questions? Great. And we just had Sandy Pentland and Kent Larson come in. And we had one of Kent Larson's teams last year in GFSA. Questions? Yes, sir. Here, let me just. Is there another microphone? I'll just take the other one.
Is entrepreneurship an innate quality, or can somebody be trained to become an entrepreneur?
Entrepreneurship be taught. Is this working? Yes. Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. I will absolutely say yes, because that is the useful answer. There's some people you can't train to be an entrepreneur because they just don't want to do it, but that's a small majority. I've been in these academic meetings where they say, here's the characteristics of an entrepreneur. And they say, the research shows, people say, were your parents entrepreneurs, you're more likely to be an entrepreneur. That's not true. The data, innovation-driven entrepreneurship, I'm a data point of one, but nobody in my family was an entrepreneur, except one crazy uncle who we never saw. But none of my parents wanted me to work at IBM and do all that, and that's what Ed Roberts' research shows. So we can take people and we can teach them, we do that over and over again. So yes, it can be taught. Yes, Luis. Oh.
Bill, thank you. It's great to see you. I loved your class when I was here. My question to you is if you can expand maybe a little bit on the spirit component that you mentioned, because many of us, I know I do, come from cultures that entrepreneurship or that risk of failure is almost an embarrassment, right? And you mentioned you have to have that willingness to look like a fool or make mistakes to be able to be successful. And how do you sort of pick that next venture? Thanks.
Yeah, so we run a program called REAP, Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, which talks about how do you create ecosystems. And the biggest inhibitor to this is culture, is people don't respect entrepreneurs. In some places, the word entrepreneurship in Andalusia, Spain, is a bad word. Entrepreneurs don't want to be called that because you're exploiting somebody else. Here's what I will tell you, is it can change, and it is changing extremely rapidly. When I left, I worked at IBM for 11 years, and in 1993 I came to MIT, and when I finished here, IBM sent me here, and when I said, I'm not going back to IBM. I'm going to start a company. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. This is 1994. And in my hometown in New York, people came up to my mother and said, what happened to Bill? He was such a nice boy. I hear he's unemployed. It's just not socially acceptable to do this in 1994. Today, 20% of the people graduating from the top universities, I'm not just talking about MIT, they want to become entrepreneurs. It's not lawyers, doctors, working for big companies. They want to be entrepreneurs. And at places like MIT, that number is much higher. It's like 200% because every student wants to start 2 companies. But that's a joke. But it changes very rapidly when you look at India and other places. And the other thing is the world's flat. There's a community. When I go, I'm going to Vietnam tonight, and I'm going to Bangkok. Those places have entrepreneurial communities where I'm at home. When I go to London, when I go to Madrid, there's an international community now of entrepreneurs. And that is not geographically constrained. So let me just say the last thing, thanks, Luis, is feel free to tweet me if you want questions. I'll readily answer them. But when I started this out, why is Donald Trump Donald Trump? It's not just the individual. There's a lot of people like Donald Trump out there. Why are there people voting at this level of 30% for a person like this? It's because there's not equal opportunity out there. Entrepreneurship and what we do needs to be inclusive. And this is the power of the emerging world's platform. We need to not just have it be in Boston and Silicon Valley. It needs to be inclusive. So you're going to be hearing a lot more in the future about inclusive entrepreneurship. And I'm very proud of the work that you're doing here, Ramesh, in that regard. So thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much, Bill.